Huge explosions light up the night sky above Kyiv. Last night saw one of Russia's largest attacks of the war so far. Dozens of missiles and hundreds of drones launched at the city. It's a grim pattern repeated every fortnight or so, leaving rescue workers exhausted. Not everyone was able to reach a shelter in time. At least 21 people have been killed. Russia claims it was targeting military sites, but this was a residential building. Its inhabitants shaken and grieving.
A missile struck nearby. We managed to reach the garage for shelter. We ran inside and then heard the explosion. We were able to take cover, but everything is destroyed. I don't even know what to say. People are still trapped under the rubble.
Throughout the day, emergency workers carried out injured survivors as well as victims' bodies. Ukrainian air defences are struggling to take down Russia's ballistic missiles. The country is running short on supplies of crucial American Patriot interceptors. President Zelenskyy today visited the scene of one of the attacks.
And we're thankful to American team for transfer of these missiles, but for today it's too slow. Be honest, too slow.
Russia claims its strikes are a response to the growing number of Ukrainian drone attacks like this one on its oil sector. But it's Russia that's the invading force, and Ukraine is trying to inflict enough damage to push President Putin towards peace. There are now queues for fuel across Russia, and authorities in occupied Crimea have declared a state of emergency. You can see just how far into Russia Ukraine is now able to strike. Russia remains in control of around 20% of Ukrainian territory. The front lines are bloody, but largely static. Over the last month, Russian forces only captured the equivalent of 1 square kilometre a day. Compare that to last June, when they were capturing 16 square kilometres a day on average. Still, President Putin shows no sign of interest in a genuine resolution.
He started a war that he can't win, but he also can't stop, because it would be so politically damaging. The economy is gradually, perhaps not even gradually, but steadily going downwards, and the Ukrainian strikes on oil refineries and other parts of the infrastructure are creating very serious shortages, which are annoying the Russians a lot.
US proposals for peace have made little progress. The Ukrainian officials have spoken with American counterparts in recent days. Russia is vowing to ramp up its attacks, even as rescuers continue to retrieve the bodies of those killed in these latest strikes.
Well, joining me now is the Ukrainian-born author and journalist Yaroslav Trofimov, who is a chief foreign affairs correspondent at the Wall Street Journal. Yaroslav, good to have you back on the programme. We do seem to be in a dangerous new phase of this very long war now, don't we?
Well, absolutely. The intensity of Russian strikes, specifically on Kyiv, is intensifying. And as the Russian military is unable to advance on the battlefield, is just really trying to sow terror among civilians in Ukraine's capital, one of the largest cities in Eastern Europe, in a tactic that really is bound to backfire, because it doesn't really damage the Ukrainian war effort. But it feels like President Putin is running out of options on how to respond to these attacks on the Russian energy infrastructure, on the tightening Ukrainian blockade of Crimea. And so he's just lashing out at civilians in Kyiv.
And is there any evidence that those long petrol queues that we were showing in our piece there from St. Petersburg and from Moscow, and of course also in Crimea, are beginning to translate into political discontent with Vladimir Putin?
Well, yes, definitely there are signs of that because remember, political gatherings of any sort are banned in Russia, and yet there are always Russians spending hours, sometimes days in Siberia. You know, the queues in Siberia are reported to be 2 or 3 days long, and they're standing there in the heat and venting their frustration with the authorities. So it's a growing political problem, and also it's a financial problem because Russia, as the late Senator John McCain used to say, was a gas station masquerading as a country. Well, guess what? There is no more gas in Russia, and Russia now has to buy fuel from countries like India to try to address this shortage. That it's just going to get worse. Even today, just hours after this massive Russian raid on Kyiv, Ukraine managed to strike the refinery in Kstovo, which accounts for about 10% of Russia's gas output. So these rates continue, and the shortages are bound to get worse and worse.
So there are fuel shortages, there are economic problems with financing the war, there's some political discontent. The Ukrainians are hitting deep inside Russian territory, and the front line is basically frozen. Does any of this suggest that Vladimir Putin might be wanting to sue for peace sometime soon?
Not at all. There is absolutely no sign of that. And President Putin himself on Sunday was adamantly rejecting the notion of even a partial ceasefire, as always, an air ceasefire that would stop the kind of strikes that we've seen on Kyiv, but would also stop the Ukrainian attacks on Russian refineries and military industries. So he's convinced he has a winning hand. He's convinced he can still take over Ukraine militarily. His journals are telling him for years now that the Ukrainian military is just about to crumble, another push, another few 100,000 soldiers in the front line, and things will be okay. That hasn't happened so far.
At the back of everyone's mind in European capitals is always that question that usually does not dare speak its name, but of course Vladimir Putin talks about it occasionally, and that is to go nuclear. Is that an option for him?
Well, there's two different kinds of nuclear use. There is a tactical nuclear bomb, which it's a weapon that was designed against tank formations that were massing in the plains of Europe. There is no such formations now. Blowing up a tactical nuke on the front line in Ukraine, where there are only a few dozen soldiers per square mile, is not really going to be very efficient, at least militarily. And strategic nuclear weapons wiping out entire cities and killing millions, potentially, that's probably something that's, even for President Putin, is a bridge too far, especially considering that countries like China and India would oppose that. And also, the nuclear fallout will touch Russia itself. So I think the operating assumption now in Western capitals is that Putin will not cross this Rubicon and will not go nuclear. But there are other ways of escalation, and obviously a big fear in many capitals, especially in countries,
All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I hope we're right. Yaroslav Trofimov, thank you very much indeed.